he's right that freedom is good. He's right that there's something uniquely good about America. I particularly like the line, I'm of America and for America. He values business. He values his own success. He values the conditions that enable that. He says, I'm confident that free markets and personal liberties are right for America, both of those. And on both, if you're really pro free markets and pro personal liberties, you have to be critical of many things that Trump is doing or proposing.
Why is our government, which should be protecting us, coming after us? Why are we being victimized by the agency that's supposed to make our lives unobstructed? I mean, the point of the government is to protect their freedom, protect their rights, and let them do what they need to do to create value.
This is not a left-right issue. It's an issue of anybody who advocates government controls, which means granting to government the power to override people's rights, is on the side of pushing the mixed economy and of corrupting the whole system. When you start threatening their business for their success, that they will then think, well, I've got to get involved in politics. The idea that there's some fascists who want to just direct government to help their companies and so on, it's such a misreading of the situation.
Hero or coward? Yesterday, February 26, Jeff Bezos announced that the Washington Post, which he owns, will shift its opinion section to focus on, quote, free markets and, quote, personal liberties. And that has sparked a furious backlash. Elon Musk, who a day before that tweeted a meme that featured a quote from Ayn Rand, praised Bezos' move. But many other people have condemned it. One former Washington Post editor called it an act of cowardice in fear of the Trump administration. What is the meaning of Bezos' new mandate to the opinion section of the Washington Post, and what is a wider context of this decision? Today we'll explore that issue and we'll look at that context, including the ties, seemingly growing ties between leaders like Bezos, Musk, and Zuckerberg to the White House. This is the podcast of the Ayn Rand Institute. I'm Elan, Journo. I'm joined today by my colleague Onkar Ghate. Onkar, I wanted to start with why we're talking about this and why this caught our attention. I think there are some obvious reasons. Everyone's talking about it, and Jeff Bezos is a really successful business leader. But from the perspective of the mission of the Institute and the kind of concerns that we have, what caught your attention? Why did you want to speak about this?
The most interesting thing from that perspective is the fact that you have a business leader and one of the most successful business leaders in this generation, of where starting Amazon from his garage to it's the powerhouse for online retail that it is now, and much more than so much of the web runs on Amazon servers and so on. So it's this enormously productive businessman who seems to have some understanding that his success was possible only in America, that America's the country that values business above any other country and tries to make a home for it. And making a home for business means not a whole bunch of subsidies and so on. And that's when you read about the birth of Amazon, that's not what it is. What it has is freedom and a protection of people's property rights, ability to trade. It's a capitalist economy, or at least in its ideals and in some of what remains of the American system. It's a system of freedom, of capitalism. It's pro-business. And he sees a relationship between that I could only do what I did, and there's many people like me in America. And he values America for the opportunity and the freedom that it gave him and enabled him to succeed. And in being the owner of the Washington Post, it shouldn't our sort of editorial page and slant be pro-American, but in a legitimate way. Not America's great no matter what we do, right or wrong. You got to say America's great. It's what's great about America's freedom. And we want to speak out in defense and support of American freedom. So it's a businessman both standing up for himself and for the conditions rightly. Like he's right about these are the part of the conditions that enabled him to succeed. and he's going to speak out in favor of those openly, not trying to sneak it in or smuggle it in. It's like, this is what our editorial page would stand for. And if he really makes good on that, I think that's a great thing. There's a question, will he make good on it, and what would it mean to make good on it? But on its face, it's encouraging.
Yeah, we'll come back to what does it mean to make good on that. I wanted to underscore what you were saying, which is this aspect. So we have an initiative called the Atlas Circle, and our goal at the Institute is to help business leaders speak up for themselves, and we also speak up in defense, moral defense of producers, people who actually earned their success. And I think that America is the country with the highest population, highest concentration of people like that, precisely because it is so free. Some of the activities of the Atlas Circle include recently an open letter to Google addressing the issue of its antitrust case, and we came out very strongly against that as an injustice against Google. And we've also published a piece which you co-authored, Onkar, on the assassination of the CEO of United Healthcare. Again, the different aspects of how business leaders and producers are being unjustly treated, and that is central to what the Atlas Circle is about. People can find out about it on our website. We'll include a link in the show notes. And my reaction to Bezos' announcement was very similar to yours. I have a lot of questions about what it means for his newspaper to live up to this vision. But on the face of it, as you put it, I found it heartening that he took this position and he put his wealth in service of the kind of things that he regards as these are the values that made possible my success. And I think they're important. And as he put it in his statement, which we'll read out passages from, he regards personal liberties, as he puts it, and the free market as these are both ethical and practical. So he sees the relationship, as you said, between his success and the success of anyone trying to do business as rooted in political conditions, which I think are distinctive to America. So I want to talk a bit more about what it is that he says in this statement, which has caused so much uproar. And I think there's a number of things going on here. We should focus on just a few of them. Some of it, I think, just is journalists not liking the fact that he has this authority over their newspaper, and who is he to come in? But let's put that aside, because I don't think that's as central to the issues here. As you put it, he recognizes something distinctive about America. So I want to echo some of what's in this, and we'll include a link to the post that he put online, and we'll put this on the screen as well. So as he puts it, quote, "I am of America and for America and proud to be so." And I mean, that's good. That's a very strong statement. And he says further, "Our country did not get here by being typical." And he goes on to say, "Freedom is ethical, it minimizes coercion, and practical. It drives creativity, invention, and prosperity." Now, again, these are true statements. The question is, what does it mean in his mind? What does it look like when implemented? But I think what's heartening here is a business leader who's proven his success as a result of these things is speaking up in favor of these. And the other aspect of this that I like, and again, we'll come to the caveats in a moment, this is exactly what you would want someone who buys a newspaper to do. Insofar as it has an opinion section, not every newspaper has to have one, but if it does, why should it not reflect the interests of the owner? Why should it be an ecumenical platform for opposing views and various views? And there are some really unsavory columnists and contributors to the Washington Post, and it's a question of what will happen to them. And I'm sometimes horrified by what I read in the Washington Post. I'm not arguing for a particular direction that any newspaper should take, but I think it's right for a business leader to think about, this is my property. Is it serving my interests? And part of the way I think of this is in contrast with the attitude of other business leaders in different contexts, in connection with what we saw after October 7th, where they had a realization, we've been funding these universities through donations. Granted, it's not a business investment, but sometimes it's understood to be, this is an investment in values they care about. Business leaders discovering after October 7th that, wait a second, we've been funding all these ideas, these irrational ideas that are hostile to freedom, hostile to capitalism, hostile to science and progress and innovation. My money's gone to arm those people who are now corrupting the minds of young people. And I think that realization was a watershed for some donors. And I think rightly so. And this is an example of what that error is, an example of what Ayn Rand talked about under the heading of the sanction of the victims. That you're enabling your own destroyers. And it was a moment when I think many donors pulled back, realizing I shouldn't be doing this. And what I hope is true in Bezos's decision is the inverse of that, which is investing in the positives that he thinks will serve his interests as a businessman and an industrialist. So to me, this is the kind of thing I'd like to see more business people do, because it's important. And the more significant they are in the economy, the more prosperous they are, the more of a platform they have, I think the bigger the leverage that their action has. So irrespective of how many people read the Washington Post, this kind of action just speaks very loudly and will resonate in the culture. Again, we'll come to the caveats in a moment.
And I would emphasize one thing that you said, which is that he's doing this, and it's refreshing that he's doing this, and he's viewing it as like, this is in my interest to do. But it's important to get that these are rational interests, that he's right that freedom is good. He's right that there's something uniquely good about America. I particularly like the line, what you quoted, I'm of America and for America. Not I'm born in America and therefore I have to, I'm of America in the sense that my success is connected to the ideals of America, that America is supposed to represent, and that people should uphold and try to defend these ideals. And this is part of what the newspaper will do. So he values business, he values his own success, he values the conditions that enable that, and that I'm going to put my money towards advocating for these things that are actually good. That's a rational conception of his interest, rather than, oh, he just happens to have a lot of money, so he's doing things to advance what he supposedly thinks is good, but he doesn't think about it at all. He's thought about it, and he's right about it. It's, again, will he follow through actually in action on this? But the viewpoint expressed here is correct.
Well, let's talk a bit about the backlash, and as the way to set the table for this. I mentioned a few moments ago that Elon Musk tweeted something like "Bravo, Jeff Bezos," and in support of this decision. And a day before that, Elon Musk posted a meme which quotes from Ayn Rand. And right before we started recording this episode, you pointed out something about that quotation, which I think is important to bring out. But the gist of it, and we'll put this on the screen and link to it in the show notes, is it's contrasting the behavior of business versus bureaucrats. And the idea is that a businessman can't force you to buy his product. He fails, he suffers. A bureaucrat can force you, he fails, you suffer. That's the gist of it. That's not a statement. I'm not reading out the quotations exactly, but I wanted to hear from you about, one, what do you think of this meme from Musk, and what's missing from this, and what should we take from that?
The positive and the basic sentiment expressed, which I think a lot of business people feel, the sort of the more articulate ones can give it some voice, or give it some voice with the help of people like Ayn Rand. That Ayn Rand, I mean, she really exposed this, that if you think of the modern state or modern form of government basically in the Western world, certainly in America, but if you go throughout the Western world, there's a sense in which government and these sprawling agencies, the SEC, the FCC, and so exist to stop businessmen from doing things. That is, stop them from growing, expanding their business. You brought up that we wrote about antitrust. And the laws exist to stop business from producing, creating, profiting. And the bureaucrat as a stand-in, sort of as the government representative, that his job is to stop business, to say, you can't do this, you need my permission, I'm not giving you the permission to do this, you can't expand, you can't merge, you can't grow. And that a businessman's whole orientation is but I want to produce. I want to be creative. I want to grow. I want to expand. And who's the government to tell me that I can't do this? Customers can tell me, in effect. The people I trade with can say, yeah, but this is too expensive, or it's not a very good product. It breaks down all the time. So we're going to stop buying this. You're going to go out of business. But the idea that the government can tell you, oh, no, that you can't create in this way, produce in this way, you can't manufacture these drugs. They sense that there's something perverse about that. And there is something perverse about that. If the government exists, and Bezos's conception, it exists to protect our freedom. And he puts it like our economic freedom and other personal liberties. The government exists to protect that, not to curtail it. It exists to protect and enable you to exercise your freedom. No, you're not free to produce. You're not free to trade. You're not free to create. So that the modern mixed economy is anti-business in a crucial way. They're right about that, and that Ayn Rand is the greatest champion of business, of the function of business, of its creative, productive function. She's the greatest defender of the profit motive, as it's selfish. Both people in a trade are trying to gain, and they should be trying to gain personally for their own lives, happiness, development. So that's all. Like, I can understand Musk tweeting this, and given that part of what he thinks, he seems to think what he's doing is, I'm reining in the bureaucrats or firing some of the bureaucrats. And so all that's positive. It's revealing, though, the quote from Ayn Rand. It's not even indicated that part of what she said in this quote is omitted, and what's omitted is revealing. So the actual quote from Ayn Rand is, a bureaucrat's success depends on his political pull. A businessman cannot force you to buy his products. If he makes a mistake, he suffers the consequence. If he fails, he takes the loss. A bureaucrat forces you to obey his decisions, whether you agree with him or not. And then this is what's omitted. Dash. And the more advanced the state of a country's statism. So a descent, statism here means a descent from a free society into a society controlled by government. So a country's statism, continuing Ayn Rand's quote, the wider and more discretionary the powers wielded by a bureaucrat. If he makes a mistake, you suffer the consequence. And then that's quoted again. But this idea that discretionary powers held by government officials is a real threat, because you're basically at their mercy, at their whim, whatever they decide next, that's what's going to happen. That's part of the criticism of what Musk is doing, and especially in the way that it's being done. And there's, on the face of it, some legitimacy to that criticism. And the fact that you're omitting it indicates that you're sort of scared that this will be stated. But this was part of Ayn Rand's view, that discretionary power, a government is the power of force. And if it's not being wielded according to laws, but by the sort of whim and discretion of individuals, there's something that's gone radically wrong in that government.
Yeah, so two quick points just before we move on to talking about this issue of the mixed economy and the accusations against Bezos that he's acting in deference to the administration, and so the concerns around that. One quick thing on Musk, and the other on the caveats about Bezos's plan. We were talking about this before we started taping, and it's interesting to wonder, does Musk sit around creating these memes, or do people do it for him and then put it in front of him and then he tweets it? I don't know. He seems like a very busy person. But I agree, insofar as this is something he's putting forward, it's not good that it's omitting something important from her statement, and it's not objective because it's not characterizing her view correctly. And I think, as you put it, discretionary power is the hallmark of an authoritarian government. It's a hallmark of statism. It's a deviation from the rule of law. So there's a real question to me of who created this meme, because he's often more of an echoer than he is the generator of things. So that's an interesting question. Is it someone in his universe, his employee, who's doing this? And that would be one way to understand it. before we move on, I did want to go back to, we flagged a couple of times, there's a caveat about what it would look like for Bezos's vision for the Washington Post to be realized, to live up to it. I don't want to dwell on that because I think it's too soon. It's a day after the announcement. We don't know enough to say what it would look like and how well it's being implemented. We should come back to that once more is known. I do think there is a worry here of who are the people who will be recruited to implement an editorial page that is championing personal liberties and free markets. And part of the worry I have here is the number of people who really understand those principles is vanishingly small. And the number of people who can defend them properly in the sense of as rational ideals is even smaller. And the part of what I think might happen here, if I have to speculate, is that this will look a lot more like the Wall Street Journal editorial page, which is very traditionally conservative. It's critical of Trump, so it's not in that populist vein so much, although there are some people with that perspective there. Or some other newspapers that are self-consciously conservative or think of themselves as even libertarian. And we have a lot of criticism of both of those sorts of movements or intellectual traditions, both the conservatives and the libertarians. And I think part of the worry I have here is this isn't going to serve his interest if he has people who are not competent or not articulate or cogent in support of these ideals. And that could actually... This is part of what Ayn Rand critiqued about the conservatives and the many people who saw themselves as champions of capitalism, which is that they didn't live up to that goal. And that causes not only a failure, but it's counterproductive because it lends legitimacy to the opponents of this view if you have advocates who are not sufficiently effective in the goal.
Yes, and I want to say something a little more specific about the kind of worry here, that it's sort of kowtowing to Trump, and we can talk about reasons why there is that worry. But I would say from this statement, the implication, that is the logical implication, is that the editorial page of the Washington Post has to be critical of many things that the Trump administration is proposing. That's not to say, well, like Biden administration's better or something like that, but and part of what I liked about Bezos' statement is that it doesn't mention conservatism. So it doesn't what he writes here doesn't sound like he's conservative. And what he says, which I like as well, I'm confident that free markets and personal liberties are right for America, both of those. And on both, if you're really pro free markets and pro personal liberties, you have to be critical of many things that the first Trump administration did, and the second one is doing or proposing. To take two obvious ones, one from the first administration. Well, personal liberties, Trump bragged about, they tried to walk it back after, but bragged about ending the right to abortion in America. That is such an encroachment on people's personal liberties that if you really think like this is what makes and is right for America, you have to be critical of that, and that the whole Trump camp is on the side of being anti-abortion. And then on free markets, if you're proposing tariffs against your biggest trading partners and not like a hostile regime like China, but Canada and Mexico, that's the antithesis of free markets. And again, if it really, the editorial page is going to be pro-free market, the logical implication has to be that it not like every day we're criticizing something Trump did, but it has to be critical of major positions that the administration says this is sort of what, I don't think they're really committed to anything, but that we're committed to, and this is what's going to make America great again. Bezos' position from this is, no, it won't make America great again. And the editorial pages have to speak about that.
So looking forward to seeing how that plays out. I think it could be a significant cultural impact if it goes the right direction. Let's talk about the backlash and the kind of concern that we've indicated earlier, which is, I don't think the statement by itself gives reason to think that this is true. But I think the wider context lends credibility to the idea that a lot of people have voiced, which is this is a step that Bezos is taking precisely because he's worried that the Trump administration or any part of the government will come after him and his business interests, including Amazon and the other ventures that he's now working on. And as one commentator put it, this is quote, he's messing with the product, meaning the newspaper, in order to curry favor with his new pal Donald Trump, who has the power to withhold contracts from Amazon and other Bezos companies. I don't think this is really the essence of the issue. I think the essence of the issue is not, oh, Amazon's looking for contracts and they're going to get blocked. I think it's more that there could be a vindictive approach towards Amazon or any of the other business interests. And I think that's not speculation. We know, going back to the first Trump administration, or even before that, before Trump was elected, when he was a nominee, he was vocal about saying, if I get into power, they'll have hell to pay. They'll be, not quite that. Those are my words, not his. But they'll be worried. There's reason for them to be worried. I don't like what they're doing. He criticized the Washington Post. He called it the Amazon Washington Post and accused it of fabricating claims about him. And people might not remember this anymore, but he was upset, or he made claims that Amazon was cheating the postal service by getting lower than appropriate rates. And of course, there was the threat of invoking antitrust against Amazon because of coverage in the Washington Post. So there's a whole history here with Trump. And I think if we broaden it from Trump, I don't think it's unique to Trump. I think this is the important piece about what you said earlier, which is that we're in a mixed economy, and that there's a certain, it's important to understand what that is. And I think many people don't give it sufficient attention. So I thought, just to start this conversation, and we want to bring in Musk and Zuckerberg too, but just to get into this, how do you think of a mixed economy? And just to really underscore what it is that creates this dynamic where one can look at an action like the one that Bezos took, and the natural question is, oh, is he trying to gain some favor with the government, or is he trying to avoid some threat?
A mixed economy, one way that Ayn Rand put it, which I think is the way to capture, it's a mixture of freedom and controls. And freedom means that it's a mixture. There's some recognition and execution in action, that is government action, of recognizing people's individual rights, the rights that are listed in the Declaration of Independence. You have a right to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Or if you take some state constitutions, they'll have as well the right to property. And that the government exists to protect this. And that means it exists to secure and protect the individual's freedom, the individuals in the nation, their freedom. And controls is the opposite. Control hands power away from the individual to the government. And the government now is going to control the citizens, and they have to function by permission, by doing what, in effect, the government is commanding them to do. And it's so a control is a curtailment of individuals' freedom. And if it takes some of the things you brought up, antitrust is a whole slew of controls. It's not legitimate law. It's not law aimed at protecting any individual's rights. It's law that enables the government to walk all over people's rights. And just think of how it's used against Bezos and Amazon. It's used against his freedom to trade and to produce and to grow. Oh, Amazon's too big. We're going to label it a monopoly. That means supposedly that you're not enriching your customers, but exploiting them. So we're working on behalf of the customers, and we have to punish Amazon. We have to stop you from growing. You can't merge. You can't take over smaller companies. We're going to end your freedom to trade and produce. Yeah, a mom and pop grocery store or retailer, they can do whatever they want. They don't have to get permission from government and so on. But you do because you're so successful. It's a penalizing Amazon for its success. And notice that the antitrust laws are so bad that, and so the opposite of what law is, they're also used, and it's not the first time, to curtail freedom of speech. So it's not just the business freedom or economic freedom. So in Bezos's language, it's also personal liberties. It's Trump threatening Bezos and the Washington Post. It was partly because he didn't like the reporting. It's too critical of me and so on. So I'm going to use antitrust to go after you if you don't. And the implication is if you don't change your reporting on me, you're going to be penalized. And that's not just an infringement of their economic freedom. It's an infringement of their First Amendment rights. And this is the controls like the antitrust laws, which are not properly laws. That's what they enable. They enable the government to take power over the individual and trespass on his rights under the banner of, well, this is law. So under the banner that this is proper, when it's completely improper in the original American conception of government.
So earlier we talked briefly, or you mentioned briefly, Elon Musk's work with DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, and there is now I don't know how to characterize it exactly, but sort of an observation that's gone around where it's Elon Musk has gravitated to Donald Trump. We saw that during the campaign, and now he's part of the government. He's working to make government more efficient in his view. There was, you mentioned before we started taping the interview that Mark Zuckerberg did with Joe Rogan, in-depth conversation, and his view, sort of he's moved in the direction of warming up to Trump. I'm not sure exactly how to characterize that, but it's noticeable. And of course, this is what people are saying about Bezos's decision, and sort of the iconic image of this is when at the inauguration there was a picture of Zuckerberg, Musk, Bezos, and Sundar Pichai from Google, all seated close to each other, sort of there to witness the ceremony. And that's taken to be, look at all these tech leaders, they're cozying up to Trump. What do you make? So one is, how do you think of that? And is it right to think it's Trump specifically, or is it part of a wider dynamic, specifically because of what happened to Zuckerberg? Because I know he has a particular critique of what happened under the Biden administration. So let's dig into that.
Yeah, it's a complete mistake to think of this as this is a Trump phenomenon. If anything, Trump cashes in on it and is more, as with many things, more open about it. So it would be more that the kind of threat he made towards Bezos and the Washington Post and so on would happen more behind closed doors. Trump, given the part of what the whole phenomenon is, he'll just say it openly. Like, yeah, I'm going to use the government to intimidate you if you don't say what I want you to say. And it's like, doesn't everybody do this? But when Zuckerberg, he has, and rightly, a lot of animosity towards the Biden administration. And it's the same thing happening, but behind more closed doors. So he talks a lot about the pressure the government, and including, crucially, I think probably was not restricted to the Biden administration, because the first Trump administration is when COVID hits and so on. But that the Biden administration is, you've got to take down stuff on this platform because we don't like, not even, they might say it's not true, but they can't prove it's not true. And so, but we don't like it. It's going against what the government is proposing and wants people to do. And we're ordering everyone around, and this is getting in the way. And so it's putting a lot of pressure on the company. And again, that's a violation of their First Amendment rights. Antitrust for companies at this scale is always in the background. And Zuckerberg's been hauled before Congress to what is Facebook doing? We don't like it. And you have so much market power. You're a monopoly, and we're going to take control of this if you don't do what we want, which means you don't have control, and you don't have property rights, and you don't have freedom. He's faced that over and over again. So when they're telling him, well, you better not post this or boost these in your algorithm, behind that is always, and we've got antitrust that we can unleash against you if you don't do what we want. So there's that. And then he talks about, and again, rightly, that the American government should be pro-business and pro some of its best companies, of which Facebook is one of them, one of the biggest, one of the innovators in the social media space. you should be on our side. And far from not being on our side, you're not even neutral against us. You have a lot. You're trying to block us at all these points, and you should be worried about China and what's happening in China. And the more you restrict us and put controls on us, you're not going to destroy us necessarily, but you hamper us in so many ways, and that opens the doors for companies in China. And then you're worried about TikTok. And so, but like, if you would leave us to be free, and indeed not just leave us to be free, but protect our freedom, which includes they face antitrust from the European Union and elsewhere. I mean, there's so much that a pro-business government should legitimately be doing, and that's not subsidies and so on, but it's protecting their actual rights. And when the company operates at a global scale, there's a lot to think about in regard to that. And Zuckerberg is rightly, you don't do this, you're not even sort of indifferent to us, you're hostile to us. And there's something monstrous about, like, you get the sense that he, like, personally thinks there's something monstrous about this. And he's right about that. And that would push somebody, well, I mean, maybe we can get something better with Trump than this. And then if we put, like, if some of us put some actual effort into getting something better, for not just hoping for the best, but trying to work with them a bit and so on, that we might get something better. I don't think that's crazy. And the idea that just by itself is proof that they're kowtowing to Trump. There might be an element of that. And I suspect I think least for Zuckerberg, I suspect for some of them there is. But if you don't see that the main issue is we've got a government that's trying to penalize us for our success. And what do we do about that? And we should not put our best companies in that situation. It's both, like, it's both as you said, the Trump administration did it, the Biden administration did it, that they think, well, maybe we can get the second Trump administration to be somewhat better, or at least better towards us, some of the biggest companies in America. The idea like that's illegitimate on its face is not true.
This makes me think that in different conversations we've had, and sometimes when we talk internally among our team, the issue of the mixed economy comes up a lot in our conversations. And one thing that I've come to the view of is that I don't think people have that concept. It's a phenomenon that we live under, and we breathe the air and we absorb it, but it's so much part of the fabric of our experience. We don't notice. Most people don't notice it, and there's a default assumption. Well, America's the freest country. This is what freedom looks like. We're a capitalist society. Everyone points to it. There is recognition that it is not fully free, because there's criticisms of people who want more freedom. But the fact that it's a mixed economy and what those dynamics are that operate under it, which Ayn Rand identifies in pretty profound ways, all of that is I think there's an obliviousness to it. And part of what we've done in various conversations on different topics, and this is a good example of it, is bring out this is the phenomenon. It needs a name. And in order to understand what's happening, you need to conceptualize it. And this is part of what I think objectivism brings that's so powerful, is that it tells you when and when not to form a concept and how to do it and why it's important, how it helps to your thinking. And the more we look at the playing out of the mixed economy, and I think it's important to stress, is it did not start with Biden, it did not start with Trump. It's something that's been unfolding for most of the 20th century, even before that. It's a long progression, many twists and turns, some ups and downs, some things that went well, and some deregulation, some re-regulation. There's a lot of complexity to it. But the essential is that this has been true of America for a long time. And I think that's part of why it's so invisible to people. And yet the kind of dynamics you've just been describing of why is our government, which should be protecting us, coming after us? Why are we being victimized by the agency that's supposed to make our lives unobstructed? I mean, the point of the government is to protect their freedom, protect their rights, and let them do what they need to do to create value. I think that's a major part of the dynamic. I think there's other things that happen under a mixed economy. We don't have to get into all of them, but I think there is, you've said this in other situations, which I think is important. there's ways in which it corrupts our thinking, people's thinking of it, and their ability to understand what's happening, because it orients you to, well, it's natural to gravitate towards pressuring the government to get what you want. It makes that, it normalizes that kind of behavior, which when it's really expressed in bold terms, it's, you're going to the government and trying to extract an unearned benefit. That's what a lot of lobbying essentially is. It's like you want to legislate an advantage for your group, your tribe, or your business, alleged business interest, because I don't think it's really true that it's an interest of the rational interest. And that's the norm. And the question is not should it be done, it's just who's better at it and what would be the opportunity. That's another way in which this is what it makes the economy looks like. It is not any part of a truly free society. And I think that this is one way in which it clouds people's ability to think about these issues. So one of the observations I was thinking about earlier today as we were getting ready to talk about this, I was thinking, what would it be like for me if I were running a company and the most powerful or almost most powerful person on the planet who's about to run the government tells me I better look out, because if he gets into power, my business interests are going to be in the crosshairs of government. And that is just, I mean, in one way, it's really terrifying. It really is. As wealthy as Bezos is, it's just, there's no match for being in the face of government persecution if the government is really off the rails. And I think the fact that it's acting in this way should be recognized as, this is not what a proper government should be doing. There's nothing normal about this. This is completely a deviation. It doesn't look like a totalitarian society, which people can more easily recognize, but that the fact that it has some semblance of freedom and significant degrees of unfreedom, I think that's part of what takes work to conceptualize, but it's really critical, because this is not at all what America is about, nor what it should become.
Another important aspect of that is this is not a left-right issue. It's an issue of anybody who advocates government controls, which means granting to government the power to override people's rights, is on the side of pushing the mixed economy and of corrupting the whole system. And that's true. It's certainly true of people who would be put on the left, who propose all kinds of economic controls, and the FCC and the EPA should have even more control over businesses. The FDA give more and more power to the government to tell businessmen how they have to run their business, what they can and cannot do. And then you wonder, well, so they start lobbying then business, and they want to get involved in politics. You've driven them to that. But it's also true, anybody on the right who proposes government controls like tariffs and so on, is you're again telling businessmen, oh no, you can't, it's in your interest to trade with some company in Canada. No, you can't do that. Or we're putting an onerous tax on you to do that. And will they start lobbying and trying to wield government power? Yes, but the culprit is the person who advocated, the primary culprit is the person who advocated that government should have this power. And part of for thinking of these tech moguls, as they would be called, I think there's zero evidence, and this is particularly true of Zuckerberg and Bezos, less for Musk, because my view of Tesla is it wouldn't exist absent government subsidies and so on, and the whole sort of government being trying to be environmentalist and so on. So that's a partial exception. But I think there's zero evidence that Bezos wanted to wield political power or that Zuckerberg wanted. When they were left alone, what they wanted to do is run their business, grow Amazon, grow Facebook, grow Meta. When you start threatening their business for their success, that they will then think, well, I've got to get involved in politics. Yes. But the idea that like there's some fascist who want to just direct government to help their companies and so on, it's such a misreading of the situation. And the real seminal point for this, for the tech industry, was Microsoft. That Microsoft didn't lobby, it didn't have lobbyists, and it wasn't trying to influence government policy. until the Justice Department went after them and threatened to break them up and did all kinds of, I mean, basically for a decade, Microsoft was sort of paralyzed because of what the Justice Department did to them. And then, yes, they have an office in Washington. And when you hear Gates talk about it, was, yeah, like, I didn't know we needed an office in Washington, but I guess we did. And then in retrospect, I made an error about that. But it's the people advocating government controls who, they're the primary corruptors of the system, and they should get the blame, not these people, because, they're involved in politics, and isn't that something unsavory about that?
Yeah, just one point to amplify an aspect that you're bringing up. I think there's one other group that deserves blame here, and it's the intellectuals and scholars who are the ones who articulate and advocate and present arguments that this is the right way to operate, and sort of justifying and not exactly whitewashing, but normalizing and justifying it with moral/theoretical positions. And I think there's an interplay between them and the kind of people you're describing, the people who are pushing it politically and sort of culturally as, this is what we need to do. Let's go let's go loot, in effect, these other companies and these other industries. And I think that interplay is really important, because it wouldn't exist. I don't think it would have the standing it does absent those intellectual justifications. And we see that. And I think that's an important part of both Rand's identification of how a mixed economy works, and I think just to me, it tracks with the reality of what's happening.
Yes, definitely.
So I think we should draw a line here, and let me, as we close, recommend a couple of resources for people. One is, I mentioned at the opening, our initiative, the Atlas Circle, which is where ARI is speaking up for business and encouraging businesses to speak up for themselves and equipping them with intellectual ammunition. You can find out more about that, theatlascircle.substack.com, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes. The other major resource that I would point people to is an essay based on a talk by Ayn Rand called Big Business, America's Persecuted Minority. You can find the essay version in Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, and you can find the talk from the Fort Hall Forum on our website. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. And there's so many points in that talk, just in the first few pages, that people will get into, that they resonate with today. They just, even specifically with, there's echoes of what's being criticized about Bezos's move with the Washington Post. There's an echo of that, not exactly an echo, but there's a resonance to that in what she says about the way business people are treated. And there's just so much to understand there, both about the injustices that productive business leaders face, and also what drives it, and how to think about the economy, the mixed economy that we live in, and the dynamics within that. So I highly encourage you to take a look at that. And with that, we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.